All right, first topic, Ali. Would you like to give a quick update on optional yield?
Yeah, I have a PR open with create bucket all set. Um, I know last week we discussed two approaches, one going file by file and one going op by op. And I think we can do both. There are quite a few optional yields or null yields that could just turn into yields because yields are passed into the function that the null yields are in. And yeah, going op by op is not as bad as long as the stack trace is printed in the log. Thank you, Yehuda, for including optional yields everywhere in services. That makes life so much easier. Um,
I did that. I don't remember. I'm not sure.
well, I did need to add this. There was no null yields in services. There was optional yields everywhere. It was mostly in RGW Rados that were the changes I made for at least to get create bucket working. I guess the two questions I had were, give me a second. Who's gonna take on this work? It's not gonna be me. And the second thing is there
Which
some way
work?
to like the optional yield stuff?
The additional ones. Well, I'm hoping that I get a request. If you reach out to Calpesh and see if you'd be willing to take on some of that. That's what we discussed. And he asked for something like this to work on.
Yeah, sure. In that case, I'll reach out. The other question I had is there some way to like benchmark the RGW to see if this actually that it had some kind of impact?
Not really easily. If you reduce RGW's thread pool down to like one thread, and then the app works, then I think that essentially proves it.
Okay.
You should be able to see if you're blocking or not, right, on specific operations. So just count how many operations blocked during some workload. See the effect.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, essentially all I'm doing is I'm printing the stack trace from whenever the warning liberato or the operations blocked call in the log, and then smoothing out making sure that his yields passed all the way up the stack from that call. Okay. In that case, I'll reach out to Calpesh, and maybe by next week, the two of us could each have an op done or something along those lines, and I'll try to get him up to speed too. Adam, thank you for the PR that you opened. I don't know if you just
review that.
Yeah, I'll review that. Did you actually just add yields to the function calls, or did you just change the null yields to yields where they could have worked?
No, I actually had to add them to the function calls and thread a couple of them through RGW Rados and stuff.
Oh, okay. Maybe you did some overlap work with my PR then. Yeah, I'll take a look and review that, and also run all this through Tethology.
So Ali, I have a question about your remove me commit in this PR that adds the stack trace to the log output for those warnings.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a helpful pattern. So I think it would be a good idea to merge a version of that that's optional, whether it's like a CMake option or what. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What do you think
I
about
can.
that?
Yeah, I can add something to that. The only reason I had that commit in there was for to show anybody or to show Calpesh and just tell him he can cherry pick that on top of whatever work he starts doing. But yeah, I can look into keeping that in the code and having a CMake option to turn that off or on.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
That's it for me. I'll add the CMake option thing to my to-do list for this.
Thanks, Ali. All right. Let's move on to Matt's topic about multi-site and its use of the Tombstone cache.
Well, bluntly, I think we need to define an alternate way to do whatever this does. It seems like we're already using Rados to serialize events, so I don't understand where this operates, but we shouldn't be relying on something in memory that serializes events.
So the problem is that multi-site resolves races with essentially M times, but deleted objects are deleted, and so we don't have access to an M time anymore. So the Tombstone cache is an in-memory cache of timestamps for deleted objects. But that's not a complete solution because it only applies to sync running on that gateway. So it doesn't scale to multiple gateways.
Can maybe share metadata cache or something like that, but then it would affect performance.
Yeah, well, it doesn't seem like a good idea either.
Well, it's need to serialize on something, right? If you want it.
Well, it's already serialized in the logs.
Yeah, but the way it's been resolved is not working correctly, right? Because whoever does the I don't remember the specific scenario that you described there, but there's some reordering in one of the gateways or in other gateways. So either you go through the logs for every operation, which would affect performance.
Well, only one RGW is supposed to be executing the sync operations for one shard of the bucket index log, isn't it?
Yeah. So can you describe how this happens exactly, or can someone?
I think there could be multiple ways to reproduce this race, but maybe the simplest way to describe it is on a source zone, you put an object, wait a bit, and then put it again to overwrite. And then on the destination zone, at some point in between those two writes, you delete the original object. So the object is deleted and doesn't have a timestamp, and then soon after we'll process the sync request.
Okay, so in this scenario, this only happens when the delete is originating in a different zone from the put.
Not necessarily. I mean, a single log could have a stream of write and delete, and sync would try to do those concurrently and could hit races.
Well, why would that happen? But the log is serial. The log is a serial sequence of events.
A bucket incremental sync isn't just doing one by one. It's using a window of concurrent syncs.
Well, I think that's a defect, right? I mean, it's straight, or at least that's easily resolved. I mean, serializing on a particular name at the end at a single endpoint doing the sync can be fixed.
Could we basically stall on deletes, empty the pipeline, process any number of deletes we have in a row, and then spread out again?
Something like that would be acceptable optimization of basically serializing and, I mean, being willing to having a mechanism to have a strict ordering for the operations on one name or one object name. That seems like part of it. If it's happening, if the delete and add are being generated essentially simultaneously at two different endpoints and we're asynchronous, that's not a bug.
How about the delete marker in the log stores an M time that you can then use instead of fetching it to compare against other M times?
It's interesting.
I think it already stores an M time, right?
Bucket incremental sync also has something called a squash map that
Yeah.
seems to be applying to object instances. So if you
Right.
see a delete and a write in the same span of entries, then it would only try to apply the latest one.
Well, for any, it sounds like for any, is it the case that for any sequence that for which that could work, that could be effective because they're all contained in the same sequence. It already doesn't happen. Then correct deletion or addition.
If the events are in the same span, then that's probably avoided, but I'm not sure what happens over. So the squash map is cleared each time that you fetch a new sequence of entries. And I don't think that we drain all of the outstanding syncs. So that's a potential place where we could
that sounds
run racing apps. But I mean, there's also the cases like the original one where these events aren't in the same log because they happened in different places.
I think that might be an example of a different scenario. I mean, there are certain events happening at different locations at around the same time. I suspect not always guaranteed to have a specific outcome. Whichever one arises is probably acceptable.
Well, we need to make sure that it ends up the same in all ends, right? And all gateway or all zones have the same view at the end.
Well, that's correct, but nothing. I don't think anything was written to accomplish that. And, I mean, things can get. I'm actually not sure because for a number of cases that is solved, at least for version, at least in recent versions of the code.
Right, but it's these deletes and the tombstone cache that are trying to provide for that, but fail in the multiple gateway case.
Because they don't share the same cache. So the tombstone cache was created to kind of solve that issue, if I remember correctly. Which I probably don't, but that's to be able to assign timestamps for an object or for operation after its deletion, so that we can look at the order.
Well, yeah, but I don't think the way it works is valid.
No, it's not valid as it is, but you can improve on that.
That's what the discussion was for.
So what are the options? Like,
Yeah, it's hard for me to, yeah, I feel like we need to map out the races and what happens to understand how we could prevent that without a local cache.
It seems to me like that at least in the case of Rados, doing the local cache thing is just weird. And just reading every sync operation to all the RGWs seems like a stupid idea. In the Rados case, we already have Rados around, so maybe a solution can be found there. All the RGWs share Rados.
well, instead of keeping in memory, you can keep it in Redis, but then you need to also remember to garbage collect it. So that's an option, right?
Yeah, we have out of line deletes, and maybe there's something that can be done there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it also seems to be the case from the discussion this morning that the bug we're seeing downstream isn't this behavior. And
Yes, Casey. So I want to reconfirm on that. So can it happen that the object could be present on source, because when the destination server tried to request for the object, it got an object not found error because that server didn't know about the put from the other another RGW server?
Sorry, I'm not quite understanding. I'm trying
So
to.
so in case of racing writes and deletes, suppose now a destination server has to sync an object and it sent a sync request to a server where the delete happened. So what will it get the response? Will it get object not present error, or will it get if suppose it's still in the cache, the delete?
So when the destination server sends a GET request to the source that had deleted it, it'll get 404 not found, and it'll.
But if there are suppose multiple servers on the primary and one has just done the put and one server has done delete, and the sync request from destination went to the server which had deleted the object.
I don't think that matters because the log will be serialize their operations from the source zone.
That's right. So suppose the log says the latest the put workload, and but when it's sent to the wrong server, maybe I'm just asking you, can it happen that from the cache it served, it gave the error object not found?
The Tombstone cache is not hooked up to GET requests. It's only recording deletes that happen locally so that sync can use their M times.
Okay. So in this case, the request would go to Rados and it will fetch the object if it's present. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think the downstream test I think another reason why this the downstream case is likely to be related to Tucson cache is because I think I'd forgotten this, but it seems like Rashna had set things up so that all the the bidirectional sync, the source, the two zones are initiating different objects by a suffix method.
No,
So
so the question here is at least in the downstream related. So the issues happen when on the same zone, multiple servers are doing delete and write of the same object within the same zone. Yeah.
So, I mean, since this is bidirectional sync, it's possible that it syncs correctly from source to destination, but something is incorrectly syncing it back and hitting this bug.
Okay. Oh,
I would expect the sync trace to prevent that from happening.
yeah, that's a type of bug that we have seen in the past and you fixed before.
and the way this workload is run, even we can't predict. I mean, at least we can't estimate how much should be the actual object count post the test run. So yeah, there probably could be possible. That's all I had on it. Thanks.
Okay. Any other thoughts here? I don't feel like we really have a resolution, but this will need more discussion.
Really need to map the use cases or the specific, or to understand what's the scenario you're talking about. But with regard to the tombstone, can probably move it into Rados, and you know, it will have some performance effect. But if you want to solve it this way,
Or we could solve. We could put it in Redis or something. I mean, I don't know how much. All these are kind of the same, but maybe Redis would be slower.
or maybe if you have more than one gateway, then do it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, agreed. That's worth thinking about. And yeah, and that would, I mean, to be fair, that could also coalesce all the different logs that could be meeting, that could be rendezvousing. So maybe that's the way to do it.
but really start with understanding the issue. Don't, make sure that whatever is solved is actually needed to be solved.
Well, I think it is, but it may not be the same thing as the downstream bug we're seeing. So, I mean, I think we made some progress here.
I can take an action item to try to describe as many of the different races as I can that could hit that.
That's helpful.
I think the races would be more common in zone groups with more than 2 zones where writes and deletes are happening on different source zones.
Yeah, it's just a limit. I mean, it's just a limit case. But if but we permit it.
All right, let's move the agenda onto, I guess, how multi-site and zipper work together.
Yeah, I spoke yesterday with Matt, and I kind of looked at the code and saw that RGW data sync moved under Rados, drivers Rados or something like that, backends, and it feels like the wrong, to me at least. I kind of understand why it's being done now, but on one hand, on the other hand, I'm not sure that would be the end of it, right? We'd probably want parts of it to be generic, unless you want to re-implement everything for each backend.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I agree
the
too.
Dependencies on Rados are minimal, and all of the kind of log storage stuff could definitely go through zipper.
So realistically, the move happened now just because we're on a bit of a time crunch for the module work, and we don't want to hold it off for this. But certainly, the plan all along has been to genericize that.
Okay, so we all agree. I'm trying to get my old sync info provider branch rebased again, and having the code moved to a different spot would make it, let's say, more complicated. But yeah, at least they say the reasoning is makes sense. Okay, thank Matt. Is there anything else you want to on this point?
No, I just wanted to be able to get surface that you're working on this, and that we have. Well, I think we agree what the end vaguely at the end. What the end goal is that replication be storage agnostic.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being a small number of things that we need to put in zipper, like how to do the leases and how to read and write replication logs.
And state.
All right, Soumya had a topic on sync policy.
Yes, Casey. So we have a couple of requirements on using sync policy to productize. I think these are the at least main feature enhancements we need. These to enable or disable at bucket level sync, similar to bucket sync enable disable commands. By default, we should be able to enable the sync policy at zone group level, but should be able to restrict it to some buckets by disabling them. So right now we allow only other way around, that is at zone group level, we set the sync policy to allowed state and we can enable for a particular buckets, but there is a requirement that they want to enable it for all the buckets by default and disable it for only few buckets if needed. And another enhancement is to keep sync track the sync done between allowed and disabled states. Suppose if a sync policy was disabled, we do not track what objects were synced, and so when we re-enable them, those objects do not get synced. So wanted to check how feasible these are. I think first one can be done with some minimal changes, but I'm not sure about the second one, how we can track the sync.
Wouldn't
What
you
was the
expect?
second one?
Wouldn't you
Sorry?
expect to need to do a new? I mean, to do a new full sync?
I think we do not do that right now. Sure.
Right. The bucket sync disable, bucket sync enable commands work that way, but sync policy changes don't have any, they don't really have any consistency model with the sync process itself, which needs to be fixed.
Right. So I mean, if you have, it seems like one, if you've had sync in place, then you have an obligation to reinitialize it somehow. It seems like maybe more than that, but that might be minimally the case.
Like,
If you've never
One-
had sync, you probably don't want just the incremental changes either. So that also, I mean, that seems the same.
one way to do it would be to just like delete the state, right? That's related to the specific bucket source bucket destination pair.
If you were doing this with, and I apologize for not being ignorant, if we were doing this with cross-region, with Amazon and cross-region replication, does it have any notion of synchronizing an entire bucket? I think it doesn't.
I'm not sure at all. I vaguely remember that it doesn't. Like it only it's
You start replicating, or you
only
stop
applies
replicating.
to
I mean,
new, only applies to new objects or something.
So it's possible to me. It seems to be possible that because we've kind of unified this feature. As I recall, this feature unifies in a notation for cross-region replication. If you're using that, you're not expecting the sync, the full sync behavior, I suspect.
Right, but you maybe you can tie it into like admin command that would make it force it to restart, right? So it can be two different options.
Where,
Someone doing CRR might. What I mean is, someone doing CRR might not want us to replicate all the other objects.
Right, I agree.
so sync policy stuff is it all stored locally on each zone? So you would have to change the policy on every zone to apply it globally?
It's per zone. No, I don't remember. There's per bucket, right? And there's per zone. The per zone one. No, I think all the zones it's stored at the zone group level, if I remember correctly. So that way, different zones know what to expect from other zones.
Right. So if you want to, okay, I'm just trying to understand how changes can be applied consistently. Like if you change the policy globally and that needs to change sync status on every zone, how do we accomplish that?
It does like a period update.
Okay. But for the per bucket level, you'd have to apply that at every zone. And so we could have the admin command.
Well, per
sync
bucket
status.
Per bucket is at the bucket level, so it's a metadata update.
Okay. So I guess metadata sync would have to detect changes and update the state accordingly.
Yep. Like this is already happening, right?
Sorry, when I said state, I'm talking specifically about sync status if we wanted to trigger a full sync.
Oh, yeah. I vaguely remember someone trying to look at that. The problem is we allow cross-bucket replication, so we can have many to one. So with status, it can get kind of complicated, right? Or can be on a prefix. Source prefix. So need to consider these use cases. Because we're not talking about necessarily a bucket mirroring for the purpose.
Well, that's what we just said. I mean, I think when one starts those operations, or they're different from the sync semantics that we and it's that we've historically exposed, and some sites still intend to use continuous replication.
Right.
So we'd want to somehow distinguish.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, they shouldn't have just different semantics.
Right. So need to understand what's the purpose and how it's achieved.
So going back to the first point, just about disable, enable at bucket level, do you know how sync policy groups and pipes are supposed to compose to accomplish that? Is there a gap in our model that prevents a bucket from overriding the zone level enable?
That prevents from the bucket level to override the zone. I think the bucket would override the zone, right? Always. If you force it, right? If you say bucket.
So we tested that. So if you set sync policy to forbidden and bucket level, it doesn't work right now. We're considering this may be a bug, so I'm trying to understand the code to fix it.
Like if the zone allows and the bucket says
Yeah.
enable, then the bucket should sync. If the zone say disabled or
no, in this case zone says enabled, but the bucket says disabled.
and it's still
it's still syncing right now.
Yeah, that might be a bug.
Okay.
Maybe maybe in this case the zone wins. I'm not sure.
But at least it's okay to fix it, right? I mean, to get this behavior, or do we always have to take this hierarchy that at zone level, if it's enabled, we have to define some semantics that we can't disable at bucket level?
Well, need to define what semantics. It's kind of weird when you have disabled and enabled, right? 3 states, and then who wins and who decides who's
So in general, so which even data flows or pipes, so which one should take precedence, zone level or bucket level?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. That's for whoever defines how the product needs to behave. One of them needs to win.
And in general, I would say that the more specific policy should always take precedence over the general one.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't understand all of these mechanisms and how they fit together currently.
So, okay, so at least the first case, I think we can fix it in the code. I'll update on it.
So I need to drop. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Yehuda.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of not knowing how this all is supposed to work together, it seems like that's something we have to try to tackle since we merged it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? Any new topics? All right, well, I'd like to share an announcement from the Ceph leadership call earlier today. It sounds like we're going to be delaying the Reef feature freeze and release by up to 3 months because of the infrastructure issues. So that should give us a lot of extra time to stabilize the multi-site stuff and the JSON support and S3 select and anything else that needs more testing before release.
Thanks for pursuing that, Casey.
I know that all the infrastructure issues are frustrating, but everybody's focused on putting out the best Reef release we can.
Well, I think it was a really good decision, and I'm glad that's happening.
I also raised the thread on the dev list about distro support. I've been trying to run the RGW suite against the newer CentOS 9 and Ubuntu 22 and seeing a lot of failures. All of the Ubuntu ones are specific to the RGW suite with things like Python versions, nose tests, etc. that we're going to need to work through. So I'll try to organize some tracker issues around that stuff. CentOS is blocked by some infrastructure issues, so I'm not sure what the gap is there yet, at least in terms of RGW. Okay, anything else before we call it? All right, thanks everybody. See you next time.
Thanks.
Fine.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.